What is up, everybody? Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I am Rockin Robbie Billups. It is Friday. That means it's time for the Rex and Robbie Show, and we got developments in the James Gunn DCFilms saga that continues to be more entertaining to most people than the last 10 years of the DCEU. Let's bring in Rex, though. How you doing, my man?
What's up, bud? Happy Friday, man.
Happy Friday, man. TGIF and all that other kind of jazz, right?
Oh yeah. And I know we made a hey GT Key, what's going on? Perry Gaming in the house. I know that we were talking about a different topic for today, but man, this DC thing just keeps happening. Bro.
I feel like this may fuel a few shows over the next few months, probably. Actually, Rex.
I don't know what's going on, but it's certainly if the goal is to get a lot of buzz talking about DC, it's working. It's definitely working.
It's working one way or another. Okay, so recently we've all been talking about what is James Gunn gonna do? Seemed like DC was in shambles. We had a whole show about it a couple weeks ago where we talked about what we should do. And one of the things that we mentioned was maybe a clean slate. Other things meant just focus on what works and develop out of that. And who knows, right? And Henry Cavill has been sacked by James Gunn. He's no longer going to be Superman. This dude quit The Witcher so he could do Superman. They announced his return in October with the Black Adam movie. It just throws everything crazy. Henry Cavill. What's crazy is that there are people who were not necessarily fans of what DC was doing in their movies, but I didn't know many people that didn't like Henry Cavill in the role. They just wanted him to kind of have a good movie just to focus in on him. Well, that's all out the window now, right? Now, don't worry, Henry Cavill's going to be okay. Just got announced Amazon picked up the rights to Warhammer 40K. They're developing a series with Henry Cavill as a producer and as an actor, and he's a big, lifelong Warhammer 40K fan, so Henry Cavill's going to be okay, y'all, hopefully. We'll see. But what do you think of this news?
He's going to be homeless or anything now that he's been told he's not going to play Superman. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Henry's going to be okay. All right? I'm sure he's not going to be missing too many meals, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I feel bad for him. He makes this grand announcement. He's not doing The Witcher anymore, which I really enjoyed, his role in that. Being replaced by what escapes me all of a sudden, Thor's brother.
Oh yeah, it's one of the Hemsworth.
Liam. Okay. Yeah, right. So, which I'm okay with as well. I've enjoyed his roles, although he hasn't really been the breakout that his brother's been. Maybe he hasn't gotten that role. I mean, I think Hunger Games doesn't really count. He was a secondary character, obviously, in that. But I think he could do a good job in The Witcher. But it does kind of suck that he gave that up, ready to go. And then all of a sudden, all the shifts happen and everything with Black Adam and Dwayne Johnson obviously happened before they pulled James Gunn and Peter Safran, as co-CEOs. So, it's kind of bad. Fighting dice, I hope not. I have to admit, though, I thought Cavill, I loved Cavill in Witcher, and I'm going to give Liam Hemsworth a chance. Who knows? It's happened before, but I agree with you. It kind of sucks that he pulled out of that to do the Superman thing. But certainly it's ironic because literally on Wednesday we were still talking about this because we had started talking about this on Monday as all this unfolded, and you had made a point like, "Hey, it's all rumors." Well, now we've come a little bit out of the rumor zone into more of the reality zone, and I think a lot of these rumors, these leaks, may be closer to the truth than we realize. All right, so to recap, in a very busy week for DC, obviously, Gunn and Safran are obviously making some moves here. So we get the news that Wonder Woman 3 is shelved for the time being. We had the rumor about Jason Momoa and Aquaman ending, and he's going to go and be Lobo, which, given what we know about James Gunn and what he tends to do creatively with Guardians and then obviously with Peacemaker and all that, it seems like a very likely rumor to come true. Okay. Lobo is that kind of secondary character that Gunn seems to thrive on. So there does seem to be some sort of logic behind that rumor. But obviously that means what happens to Aquaman. And obviously the Ben Affleck Batman now is out there. And it seems fairly, after everything that's happened to me, it seems fairly certain that that's the last domino that's going to fall. Announcement will be made that Ben Affleck will not be returning as Batman in any capacity.
Somebody actually asked James Gunn about Ben Affleck, and he said that they had met with him because what he wants to do is direct, and they want him to direct something. So I think Ben Affleck may be involved at some point, but not, I think it will be behind the camera, right? But at the same time, a lot of this just sounds like, because with Henry Cavill, they're like, hey, we had a great meeting. James Gunn said, we got some ideas for the future of what we could, work together. And that just sounds like them trying to smooth everything over with fans and be like, hey, no, we're cool. It's all good. But yeah, it's weird how I think it's all out, man. That's what I think, Rex. I think we're getting a full reboot. I think everything is gone. I think it's out. Like even Peacemaker. I think once they do Peacemaker season 2, they're going to release, like, the unfortunate thing is they have like a whole other year of movies and TV projects that are connected to this DCEU that now probably a lot of fans will be disheartened to even go and see, right? So I think some of their numbers are going to plummet on some of those things, but I think there's going to be a new focus. And James Gunn is writing a Superman movie with a younger Superman to kind of spin everything out of there. So I think we're getting a complete reboot. I don't think we're getting Ben Affleck Batman back, Aquaman, Jason Momoa. I don't think we're getting Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I think it's a complete from the ground up reboot, which is crazy to me that so many people over these last 10 years kept saying, stop and just redo it. But then when these moves start getting made, people get really upset because we've become attached to like Henry Cavill or the idea that maybe they're pulling it together. But how many times have we had the conversation where we're like, they need to start clean. You can't start clean with Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill because you've already it's already kind of muddied. You know what I'm saying? That's what I think. So I think it's a whole new reboot.
I would agree with you. Perry Gaming, now burn it all down and rebuild. I think I don't know. How do I put this? I think that again, I don't agree with all the decisions they've made. I really enjoyed the Wonder Woman. I even enjoyed Wonder Woman 84. Okay. I know it was not widely accepted or, widely liked, but I actually enjoyed it. I like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I love Jason Momoa as an actor. I loved him in Aquaman. So I'm disappointed that part of the reboot would involve that, but it kind of sort of has to, right? The Henry Cavill Superman thing, it's been back and forth, and I know there are people that like it, like him in that role, and there are people that have been critical of him in that role, and so on and so forth. I think that part of, how do I put this? They've been in such a mess for so long that only a hard reboot's really going to work. And no matter what, figure drawing. Yeah, dude, I liked it. I'm sorry, man. I can't. What am I going to tell you? I know all the problems with the Wonder Woman 84. I get it. I recognize them, but I still enjoyed the movie. So what am I going to tell you? It's not the first bad movie I've liked, and probably not the last. But I don't see any other way around this, because you bring Gunn in, you say this is the direction we want to move in, and we want to just kind of, as figure drawing says, burn the whole thing down and rebuild, or maybe it was Perry Gaming, burn the whole thing down and restart, which they've talked about again and again and again. And every time that they've tried to do that reboot, it's just worked out horribly. Nothing has seemed to work, and we've talked about it before. Okay, so we do Justice League. Okay, we had Schneider do it, but that didn't work out. So we brought in who was it? They brought in, what's his face?
Joss Whedon.
Josh Whedon, right? Everybody universally hated that movie, more or less, right? So they, so the fans get in there, and there's pushing for the Zack Snyder version. So they go back and they let him redo it and recut it, and they re-release it, right? Money. I agree. We don't need another origin story. And I think one of the James Gunn releases said that they weren't going to go to an origin story, although they were going to go to a younger Superman, right?
Yeah, and younger doesn't mean a kid, like Steph was pointing out in the chat.
Right, that's a good
probably
point.
means like in the 20s or 30s, something like that. Just
Right.
meaning that they don't want a Superman that's already died and come back. You know what I'm saying? Like they kind of rushed into Superman's story in the last 10 years, right? They go straight to the birth, death, and resurrection. That's what they did, pretty much.
And Mark McGrath, I would agree with that as well. Is that when you talk about Cavill, Godot, and Momoa, to bring them all back, you know, and Affleck obviously is not cheap. You begin to work around that. You begin to look at that explosive budget, and is it worth it? You know, you're taking that budget that you may use on special effects or whatever else, and you're spending it on the talent. Is it necessarily going to bring it to that point? I don't think so, obviously. All right, you know, you've had Cavill, you've had Ben Affleck in these roles, and it hasn't been well received. So at this point, what are they going to add with their exorbitant, you know, price? That's a good question. And if you reboot, you kind of have to reboot. There's no question. I think Gal Gadot would be successful as Wonder Woman. I think Momoa is proven he's successful as Aquaman. But if you're going to do a full reboot, and that was a problem again that they sort of faced at DC was, well, some of the characters are from before, and some of the characters are going to reboot like the Flash, and you know, we're not going to listen to the fans. You know, one or the other, okay? You know, in or out. You can't straddle the fence, which they've been doing for years now, and it's had pretty bad results, you know? I agree, Missing Link. Momoa definitely fits Lobo over the Aquaman thing, but you know, he certainly will fit into that role a lot better. But again, I liked his Aquaman. It was an interesting take on it. So you've hired Gunn, you've brought him on board. You're saying, okay, we're going to give you free reign, and he decides we're going to reboot the whole thing. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Okay, maybe let him put his take on it. Maybe bring in some young new actors. Okay, you know, the interesting thing that the MCU did was they took established actors, they took, you know, stars, they took mid-range actors, and they took some unknowns, and they used all of those to create the MCU. And whether that was by design or by accident, whatever, it seemed to work very well. Some movies, like an Iron Man, you need a Robert Downey Jr. to kind of pull it, okay? And then Spider-Man, Tom Holland works. New Kid on the Block, okay? You know, so maybe you do need a mix of this, you know, and obviously it's been proven that Affleck and obviously Henry Cavill, they don't really fit there, okay? You know, again, people say we love Cavill as Superman, but well, then why didn't more of you people go out and watch the movie?
Yeah, you know, and plus both of them were always in and out. You know what I'm saying? Like they were like out of they were out of the DC. Like it's just been so muddy and all these different cooks in the kitchen. Like I think this is the best thing to do is just, okay, James Gunn's the cook. Let's do it. And I understand, like, also another thing that I think, obviously people got excited when Henry Cavill shows up at the end of Black Adam, which I haven't seen, but it's on HBO Max today. So I'm going to watch it tonight. And the Rock, Dwayne Johnson, was trying to get that project made for so long, and he kept promising these big epic things, and we're building up to a Superman versus Black Adam thing, right? Well, that ain't going to happen because you think the Rock's going to be cool with James Gunn basically undercutting his big announcement too. It was all attached, but at the same time, box office numbers were very underperforming for Warner Brothers on Black Adam. So maybe they don't care, and I think it's unfortunate. I would have liked to have seen Henry Cavill just have one really good movie that people could appreciate as being a great Superman movie, right? I really like him in these movies. I love Man of Steel. I love the Ultimate Edition of BVS, and I love the Snyder Cut of Justice League, even though there's a good 2.5 hour movie in there. It's an okay 4 hour movie. You know what I'm saying? But I liked him, and I would like to have seen that. But at the same time, I am tired of this wish-washy, this counts, this doesn't. Well, we're going to focus on this. Well, we don't know. Well, we're going to bring in Michael Keaton. Oh, we're going to do this. Like they just didn't know what they were doing. They kept changing their minds. Have a plan. And now let's do it, stick with it, and wait and see approach, you know? And however, it does remove some luster from seeing some of these films coming out, like Shazam 2, Flash, and maybe Flash will be used as the reboot, you know, as other people said. But I think starting fresh is the best thing to do. And I saw somebody say, you don't want to rush into a reboot.
wow.
how much longer
we passed rushing way back. Okay.
Yeah, and I want to see, like, how much longer do we want to see the DCEU die this slow death that it's been doing pretty much since the beginning, right? Because even though people like me enjoyed a lot of these films, a lot of people didn't seem to like it. And if it ain't working and you can't fix it, just buy a new car. You know what I'm saying?
This to me is not rushing. Okay, the DCU for years has been basically, best analogy I can make, you're at the airport, you're at the gate, you're waiting for your flight, and every 15 to 20 minutes, okay, you're taking off in 30 minutes, then you're taking off in 40 minutes, then you're taking off in 60 minutes, then you're taking off in 90 minutes. It feels like that. Like we're going to redo this, and then we wait. And they don't really redo this. They never commit to the reboot. You know, it's kind of, well, we're kind of rebooting it, but we also got our foot over here. So, all right, missing link. Again, I haven't seen Black Adam. I'm waiting for it to actually be free on streaming before I watch it. But I'm, and missing link. Yeah, there's another question I want to discuss. Should they do a combined universe or whatever? But here's what I see as has been DCU's problem. Okay, and they were right. Zaslav was right in the sense he needs a Kevin Feige. Now the point is, you've hired James Gunn, you've hired Peter Safran. Okay, are you going to let them do what you hired them to do? Now that becomes a real question, because if you look back, the primary problem is there have been way too many cooks in that kitchen, and the cooks keep changing, right? So you have one guy who says this is the direction we're going with, right? And then what seemed like a common problem for them. Well, you get into it with Schneider, and then all of a sudden you bring Josh Whedon, and then he takes what's there and he shoots some new scenes and he cuts it all up, and the vision has changed and people hated it. All right. There's probably nothing more dramatic than what happened with Suicide Squad. The total wrong move is, all right, let's recast some of it and remake it. No, dude, it was a loser. People hated it. Move on. Okay. And this is kind of the problem. And the reason that is because there have been so many voices. And I love The Rock personally. Love most of his movies, even the bad ones, because there's always those scenes. And there was this one movie I just rewatched, Adventure something or another, kind of like Lost in the Jungle, where his stepson, whatever. And it was just a kind of goofy, bad movie. But it was still fun to watch him. So I like The Rock. But that's another problem. Okay. All of a sudden you got The Rock going, wow, I told DC it has to be Henry Cavill. Okay. He's got to be super. Why is The Rock talking about the DC universe as a whole? Could you imagine that happening in the MCU? Could you imagine Chris Evans going, well, I think that, any of these guys? No, it can never happen. And that's the problem in a nutshell for DC all of these years. How is Dwayne Johnson deciding who Superman's going to be? I realize you're trying to save the Black Adam thing, and they jammed you just like they jammed Cavill. Okay, and you thought that even with the weak box office, if you didn't have this regime change, the odds of a Black Adam 2 were pretty high, I would think. Right? You got the Dwayne Johnson, The Rock Johnson's box office poll. You've got him. It didn't meet expectations, but it wasn't a disaster by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and one of the things Henry Cavill said in his statement was, all the stuff about me returning, that happened before the hiring of Gunn and Safran, right? So now it's a changing of the guard, right? And so it's a casualty of that process, and I believe Black Adam's going to be that as well, because it just also didn't hit. In fact, the biggest thing that seemed to get people excited about that was Henry Cavill returning as Superman. But it's meaningless now, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And here's some, some of the comments, missing link, 22 comics. I think what you're saying is a very good point. Okay. Gunn was hired to make movies. And the reason I'm willing, again, I was just as disappointed as most fans about Gal Gadot, about Jason Momoa, that kind of thing, right? But I stepped back and said, you know what? They hired this guy to do a job. Okay. The DC universe has been a hot mess for way too long. So some hard decisions have to be made, right, to reboot this thing completely. And I agree with 22. The reason I was excited that James Gunn was hired is, from we talked about this, 2-3 weeks ago, is that I watched this guy take Guardians of the Galaxy that nobody cared about, okay, a living tree and a talking raccoon, and he turned it into something we all wanted to see. That's an amazing thing. Then he took the disaster that was Suicide Squad 2 and plucked a character that was not clearly not the star of the movie, took this character, recognized something there, and made a series out of it that we all got to admit, universally accepted. Wow. I loved it. I mean, I couldn't wait to watch every new week of Peacemaker. So I'm willing to give him some rope here to see where this goes, because somebody needs to do something. Okay, the current environment and the current kind of existence that the DCU has had these last few years is just a hot mess. Too many voices talking, including Zaslav. Okay, pulling the direction, changing directions. If Gunn fails, he fails, but it can't be worse than what we've had by any stretch of the imagination. And Gunn has the street cred to say, hey, I know what I'm doing. Be patient. Okay. And look what I did with these minor titles by everybody's estimation. Minor titles, I pulled them into the mainstream. Give me a chance. All right. Somebody earlier said that there wasn't a lot of information. If they just said we're moving in a different direction, we're gonna fire Cavill. I don't know that I actually think Gunn and Safran played it the right way. The fans, and no offense to that, but the fans have certainly had an effect on the executives at DC. How did we get the Zack Snyder version? How did we get a second Suicide Squad? That was fan pushback that created that. And I'm not saying fans shouldn't have a voice. They absolutely should have a voice. But that's been the problem, I think. You got the executives looking at shareholder value, okay, pulling things one way. You got fans who have a voice pulling it one way. You got actors like Dwayne Johnson pulling it another way. I think that's the problem. I think Gunn has to take total control, and he realizes that the fans have a voice, and he's trying to keep everybody calm until he can get it out of the gate. Okay, he realizes, or he has enough confidence in himself. I know people are going to be upset. I know people aren't going to be happy about some of the hard turns we got to make, but give me a chance to put something out there and see if you guys like it. And I think we will. And I think, unfortunately, he needs to do it this way because there has been a hot mess. It's not like starting with Kevin Feige and Iron Man and starting it from scratch with no expectations. You know, that's like building a new house. You start from scratch. You have an empty lot. Okay. You put the foundation in and you start building. He's walking into a 150-year-old building, okay, that you want to save, but you got to gut the whole inside out. That's a lot harder than putting up studs and building from an open lot. And I think that's the best analogy I can make. And we got to give him enough time to be able to get the house up for us to go in and take a tour and say, hey, this ain't so bad. You did a great job. Or, you know what? We hate it. What the hell are you doing, James? What were you thinking?
Yeah.
But, he needs a chance to be able to do that.
Absolutely. There was a lot of conversation about standalone versus connected in this. And I think they're going to try to take that kind of early approach Marvel did, where they're going to have some movies that are standalone that are part of a larger world that start slowly tying in together. Right. And I think that is what we need to see happen. I think it's good for him to start focusing in on a Superman movie and maybe this and this and that. And, I'm excited for it. I like James Gunn. I wasn't the biggest fan of his Suicide Squad movie, but I do agree with Steph that it was leagues more enjoyable than the previous one. And I've said this before, and I know that this isn't the popular thing to say right now, because it seems like James Gunn is disconnected from what fans want with the firing of Cavill. But I think James Gunn understands more what fans want than a lot of these executives that have been pulling these strings, either at the MCU or the DCEU for these last few years, right? With Suicide Squad, he knew the tone that was wanted by fans, right? Whether or not he hit that exactly, he knew what to do there. He knew what to do with Peacemaker. He knew how to make Guardians of the Galaxy. He knew how to take the best parts of things like Star Wars, right? And the MCU films, but also craft something of his own that also has heart. So I'm excited to see what he does. I'm excited to hear that he's writing the Superman movie because I think James Gunn is a really good writer. I think he's such a great writer. So I'm very excited. I do believe they're going to do a Superman movie. I believe we'll get a Green Lantern something. And, the idea is that he wants it all connected with the animation and the video games and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if we need to go that far out or whatever, but like just take the time, build it out, have some good solid movies, get these creators. I think James Gunn's going to be able to bring in some really creative people and just let them do their thing. And I think DC will be better if they just do that, as long as the executives stay out of it. That's the problem. You know, your favorite dude, he needs to stay out of it, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. But I agree with most everything you said except for one point. You say that it may seem like to the fans that Gunn is not tuned into the fans because of the whole Cavill thing. I actually disagree with that statement. I would say the opposite is true. I think he is tuned in with the fans, but he also realizes it's like when you take your kid to get their vaccinations, okay, when they're little, okay, you know they don't want it. They're going to fuss. They're going to cry, but it has to be done for their best interests down the line, right? You don't want your kid getting polio or something like that, right? So you realize it's going to hurt for a second. And I think that he is cognizant that the fans do have influence, certainly on the executives, as we've seen. So he's trying to say it in the best way possible. He knows there's going to be pushback. He knows there's going to be people that are unhappy. But, you know, he's trying to soften the blow, if you will, as much as possible. Because if he came out and just said, you know what, yeah, we don't want Cavill as Superman. We're going in a different direction. All right, you know, we're trying to do a hard restart. So Cavill's part of that Schneider group, so we don't want him. Okay, fans would be up in arms. You know, they have pitchforks, torches, ready to hang. You know, Gunn and Safran, right? So I think he is cognizant of the fans' influence, but he also realizes this has to be done. Because I can't keep Cavill, I can't keep Affleck, I can't keep all these things and reboot it. And you guys hate the reboots, so you gotta take the shot in the arm and just accept that it's gonna hurt a little bit, but I've got to do this for the betterment of, you know, something that's going to be a little cohesive, not like the hot mess. I'll tell you what an interesting question is. Missing link. I agree with that. That actually is what I'm going to touch on. What are they going to do about Batman and Joker? All right, because that's, I think, where the biggest battle for Gunn's going to be. Because obviously Joker was a huge box office success, and I don't see WB Discovery walking away from that, Warner Discovery walking away from that, right? But that may be able to be independent and exist in its own bubble, and Gunn may be able to work around that, right? But really I want to know. I'd love to be a fly on the wall to hear the discussions about the Ezra Miller Flash movie. I can't imagine Gunn wants that released. Okay, I mean, again, I don't know anything, but it would just seem to me, if you're willing to get rid of Cavill, boy, I'm sure you just want to nuke this Flash movie. Okay.
Well, one thing that I think they could do with the Flash movie, and they still got time if they haven't already been doing this, and they could use it as kind of like a touchstone point to be like the end of the Snyderverse, as well as everything that came before it. They could use it to kind of like, with Keaton, with Affleck, they could use it to kind of be like the DC films and eras of the past. They've all come to this point, and then you can end Flashpoint in a way where it does start like a reboot, right?
62 lefty. They're changing it to the Flash.
But I think they could do that. Like, I think that would be neat if you made it like this thing where you tie it in.
Again, I got to imagine if I'm James Gunn, that's the last thing I want to do. Okay. You know, you guys have tried this. You brought Cavill back in Black Adam. You've been doing this for years now. Okay.
Well, they're not going to
left and right.
Yeah, but they're not going to can Flash, Shazam 2, and Aquaman 2 like they did Batgirl. You know what I'm saying? Which was like, don't forget, that was 2 directions ago. And that was the reason why they canned that, because they were switching directions.
Batgirl was never meant to be anything but streaming. So, and you know how I feel about that. But you know, well, I mean, they're willing to walk away from Jason Momoa as Aquaman. They've already walked away. They're willing to walk away from a third Wonder Woman film. All right, you know, and they've obviously walked away from Cavill. So this Flash movie that is got so much baggage, all right, with the whole Ezra Miller thing, and then on the fact that we've been waiting. Now you're gonna have to go back and reshoot certain scenes to make it fit within that universe. If you're James Gunn and you want to start fresh, I'm thinking your attitude is like, you know what? Let's flush this one too.
Well, I'm not
But just
saying make it fit in with what James Gunn wants to do. I'm just saying you could use it as a definitive finale for the previous eras of DC, with the Ben Affleck representing the Snyderverse, Keaton representing what came before.
Want to see that. You know, that's the
I mean,
problem.
they got 200 million more plus sunk into this movie. They're going to put it out. I mean, I'm just saying you could use it as a point to be like, this is a nice point to like say this is the end of it.
I would say it causes more harm than good. And at this point, you're writing off so much, you might as well. That'll definitely push you into a massive loss, okay? And loss carried forward for years to come, I would think. But you know, because the problem is that you've now got two problems, okay? First of all, it's been a hot mess, okay? The whole Ezra Miller thing, the delay and the delays and the delays. So people are kind of like, eh. And now you've added another crippling factor, which is, well, we all know this movie isn't going to go anywhere. All right. This is the end of that universe. So whatever comes after. So do I really want to see the conclusion of this hot mess? Okay.
Hey, I get it. I think the box office is going to be hurt on like for these next, but I think that DC at this point is kind of prepared for that at this point. Right. And Gunn will start announcing stuff at the beginning of 2023, they say, right? So Gunn and Safran are going to start announcing some of their early projects and what they're doing. And I think that if I think, for instance, James Gunn knows that we want a Superman movie with like a big threat, like a Brainiac, you know, or something like that. We don't just want Luthor. Now, Luthor needs to be in it, but we don't just want Luthor snatching land in every Superman movie. We don't just want him fighting Batman and then leading to a weird version of Doomsday. We don't want just Zod. We want Mongol. We want these giant threats. You know, Brainiac's the one we really, really want. And we've been needing a Brainiac-centric movie. Brainiac could be like a phase 1 type lead up, right? And it could build up into something bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And who knows what Gunn's planning. And I'm excited to see what it's going to do. I'm excited. And the Batman question, he said Batman's going to be a part of the universe for sure. And it's definitely not Matt Reeves' Batman. I think they have faith in. I think they're going to let that kind of do its thing, right? I don't think that it's going to affect the idea of this being a trilogy for this Batman film franchise. But I think that Batman will be something they approach as they get a little bit further into things. I think Gunn is wanting to start with Superman, maybe branch out from there, but I don't think he wants to put the focus on Batman in this universe so firmly in the beginning phases. And I think obviously the audience is smart enough to know that movie's separate or whatever, but it is a weird thing to have that continuing, but maybe it will be.
I just think that with you know, how well they did both Joker and Batman, I just don't see how you can talk executives into not doing it. Right. You know, they're seeing the dollar sign. So I understand that. Somebody said, it was a comment earlier. Let me see if I remember who said it. You know, to me, that's right. Somebody said that they said the Flash movie tested well, right? Again, that came right on the heels of Batgirl being shelved and them announcing the Flash was going to continue. What else are they going to say? All right, you know, and somebody else said, I agree. You know, the problem is that. Why am I going to invest in this? Go to the movie theaters to see this movie when I know that universe is not going to continue. Okay. The whole, you've already got all the Ezra Miller baggage that you've been carrying now for 2-3 years, waiting for this movie to come out, you know, and all of the, it's going to do all kinds of things to the universe. We all know that that's no longer true. So why invest the time and money in watching it? All right. You might, if it's streaming and you're bored one Saturday night and you're sitting at home, you might turn it on. But are you going to rush to the box office? Why? You know, and if you're going to try to use it as a conclusion, okay, is anybody excited about, you know, this universe concluding? Yes, they are. But do they need somebody to wrap it up into a bow? There's no way to wrap it up in a bow. It's been a hot mess already. So there's really no way to wrap this cleanly up. How are you going to do it? So to me, it makes probably more sense from a Gunn standpoint to just shelve the whole damn thing and start from scratch again, you know, and that's going to be the challenge, really, whether or not he's going to, you know, Safran and Gunn are going to be able to exercise enough control over the executives that they can really push in their direction. and the direction that they want. You know, there was some argument about comparing Feige and Gunn. I'm not going to say one or the other, all right? But I would say that, you know, people that are saying, well, you know, James Gunn is no Kevin Feige. Well, he's not. You know, he's been a director all this time. Can he do what Feige did? I don't know. But he hasn't had a chance to do it yet, I think is what I'm, you know, what I'm kind of, you know, stumping for is that maybe he can, maybe he can't. But man, you got to, you know, before you call somebody a bad hitter, he's got to have an at bat, right? You know, actually several at bats. You can't make a prediction before the guy's even gotten into the batter's box and looked at a single pitch, right? Which he hasn't done. So you got to kind of get, you know, we're judging him based on pre-game interviews, if you will. Sticking with the baseball analogy, you know, missing link. That's very true. That's my point. Is that I'm giving him enough credit that he's done some pretty amazing things. You know, as a director, he's taken these unknown characters and turned them into household names. That's absolutely true. All right, and to me, it's amazing. You can take a talking raccoon and a living tree and turn this whole thing into a household name. Is amazing to me. It's literally amazing.
I just want to point out, Rex, that most trees are living.
So. I'm sorry. A sentient tree. I'm sorry.
Hey, who's to argue trees aren't sentient? Come on, man. We don't know.
All right. Ambulatory, mobile. Okay. How about that? All right. Fight that one, Robbie.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. Treebeard is a little offended.
You know what? Yeah, exactly. Missing link. Who knew who the hell Peacemaker was before Gunn? All right.
Dude, nobody knew Peacemaker because when DC folded in the Charlton characters, the Question worked, Blue Beetle worked, Captain Atom worked. They never were able to make Peacemaker work. Ever. Now it does.
You know, yeah. Ganjabar, I don't think that's up to Gunn, really. Okay. I think that he's not going to be able to overwhelm the executives on that universe. And I think I think Gunn's smart enough to say, you know what? Those can exist on their own. Okay. And this was something that predated Gunn and Safran as well. They already talked about it. Well, we're still gonna have Ben Affleck as Batman. You know, that's a different universe. You know, and then we're gonna have Matt Reeves Batman. Okay, so that's not too hard to swallow, because it's something that Marcus Cornelius talks to. You know, that's something that's already pre-existed his tenure there. So I don't think that's as hard to sell, and I don't think he can convince the executives to walk away from that kind of money. You know, that was very successful, one of the few successes that DC's had with that. So they're not going to walk away from it, but it can exist independently. You know, we can sort of say, well, this exists somewhere else, so we'll watch this. But the Schneider, Whedon, whatever you want to call it, universe, it's been a hot mess, man. It's just been an absolute hot mess, and you need a hard reboot. So I'm willing, again, not happy about Momoa and Gal Gadot and all that. You know, I'm okay with the Cavill thing, really. I'll be honest with you.
Well, it's unfortunate for Cavill because he got caught up in all the Snyderverse stuff, right? And I think it was somebody. I think maybe Steph had said it earlier, where like it's a shame that we never got to see Henry Cavill without Snyder's influence on the character of Superman. Right. And I agree with that.
I agree with that. But again, he got caught up in it, and it was fine until The Rock brought him up and, you know, and brought him in the cameo and whatever. And then they obviously switched gears, you know, so he got caught up in the nonsense that is DC. You know, every 3 to 6 months, we're going to make a hard U-turn. Okay. And do it differently. And that's been really the problem. And again, too many cooks in there. You know, again, all the respect to Dwayne Johnson, but why is he making comments on what the direction of the DC universe? That's not really for him to say, is it? You know, and that's not something you would see happen in the MCU, which is the point I made earlier. You don't see somebody, you know, if anything, guys like Tom Holland and other actors get you know, wrapped on the hand for revealing too much. There's so much, you know, staying within the line, so to speak, and DC's never had that. People leaking stuff all over the place. Zaslav saying, you know, right after hiring Gunn, we're not going to have 8 Batmans. Why are you even commenting on this, bro? You hired somebody to take care of that. Why are you even commenting on this? What if Gunn decides, you know, and Safran decides, you know what, it'd be kind of cool to have 8 Batmans. Then what are you going to do?
Yeah,
you're not helping, is my point. You know, if you're going to hire the guy, do the hard reset, then do the hard reset.
Yeah. And I think that's what they're doing. So there are our thoughts. Thank you, everybody who joined us in the live chat. And if you're watching this on the replay, comment in the comment section and let us know what you think about the news of Henry Cavill out as Superman and the possibility of a complete reboot from James Gunn and Peter Safran on the DCU. Rex, thank you for joining us. What's coming up for you, buddy?
Well, you got to tune in tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll have Nick on the Experience with his original art show. Some great stuff. Some George Perez stuff where portion of proceeds are going to be going to his widow. So you definitely want to check it out. Some great one-of-a-kind collectibles from George Perez. And as usual, some great recreations by I want to say Jim Starlin, but it's not Jim Starlin. But and of course original art as always. So you definitely want to tune in and check it out. Some great stuff there, and of course some great George Perez stuff. And you and I will be back on Monday. We'll see if DC continues to provide us with fodder. We could be talking about this for the next month.
Yeah, we really could. Can't wait for the next development, right? 1 week it's Patty Jenkins, the next week it's Henry Cavill. What's it going to be next, man? We'll find out.
Oh, I can. It's quite something when the DC news is not about Ezra Miller.
Yeah, that's good. Next week's headline would be like James Gunn fired, Rock hired as the guide for the DC film.
Oh, Lord.
All right. And join us for Dylan's Horror Show tomorrow night. We're going to have a holiday horror feast, and we're talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, 4, and 5. Weird stretches all, but some of them are proper weird stretches. Anyway, I'm Rockin Robbie Billups. That's Rex. We're dipping out. Y'all have a good one. Station.